and he's very soft spoken. So I still remember his kind, gentle ways that he talked with me. So I'm so glad that I was able to give this memorial Dhamma talk today, and I'm also very grateful to Samar Singh family for their support in the initial period of our Pittsburgh Buddhist Center. They became a part of that initial community who supported the Pittsburgh Buddhist Center to get established. I was a very new monk at that time to US, and but Mr. Dharmasiri Samar Singh and Shirani Samar Singh and many other families supported me very much. So I have a great appreciation for that help that you gave me during the formation period of Pittsburgh Buddhist Center. So with that note, let me now start the Dhamma talk. So today our talk is going to be about the Buddha's teaching on one aspect of the nature of our mind, the nature of our ordinary mind, and recognizing the nature of our ordinary mind, and then learning how to transcend some weaknesses and some negative patterns in our mind. So I remember reading a book written by Venerable Jnana Ponika, a well-known German monk who lived in Sri Lanka. In his book called Heart of Buddhist Meditation, he's very briefly explained what is the purpose of meditation, what's the purpose of Buddhist teaching. And he said three terms, the whole goal of Buddhist training is to know the mind, to shape the mind, and to free the mind. So he presented this teaching in three terms: to know the mind, to shape the mind, and to free the mind. So the first one is called to know the mind. That means we should be familiar with our ordinary mind. We should be familiar with the nature of our mind and how the mind operates. What are the common patterns in our mind. How mind reacts to things. So learning about all these habitual patterns that we have developed over the time. So being familiar with those patterns is to what it means to know the mind. So to know the ordinary mind, its patterns, its nature, how it responds to situations. So being familiar with one's own mind, and that's what we mean by the know the mind. Once we get to know the habitual patterns, how mind operates, and all this, the nature of the mind, and then we can decide, which patterns are helpful and which patterns are not helpful. So because our mind operates in a particular way, it's each individual mind operates in his or her own way, and no minds. I mean, we have common nature of all human minds, but at the same time we have our unique, distinctive nature of everyone. So once we get to know about those habitual patterns in the mind, and then we can decide which patterns are helpful and which patterns are not helpful, which patterns are healthy, which patterns are not healthy, or which patterns are wholesome, which patterns are not wholesome, or which patterns are kusala, which patterns are akusala. And then we can learn the next step is to shape the mind. That means we make effort to promote the kusala patterns and the wholesome patterns, helpful patterns, and then we try to weaken and then eventually get rid of the unhelpful patterns or akusala patterns. That is what we mean by to shape the mind. So first is to know the mind and then to shape the mind. But before we shape, we really have to be familiar with our mind, to know how this mind operates, with own, self-observation. And of course, in learning the teachings of the Buddha can also help and guide us to really grasp the nature of the mind, to recognize certain patterns and in the mind. But then once you get to know the mind, and then we get the opportunity to shape the mind, to select, which ones to promote, which ones to weaken. And as a result, what will happen at the end, to free the mind, that means, you develop this ability to free your mind from all unnecessary, unhelpful tendencies. And then you get this ability to, operate the mind at your will. Right now, we don't have the ability to operate our mind as we want. Of course, if although we call it, it's my mind, but it's not a kind of mind that we can fully control. If that is the case, we should be able to stop thinking about the things that we don't want to think. But I mean, if you have ever tried that, that it's not going to happen. And if you have done any form of meditation, and you soon realize that mind will not stay on meditation. Mind will not stay on the object that we select to pay attention to. Mind has all other things. So therefore, we don't have the ability to really control our mind, but that's an ability that we will gradually develop. So to be able to free the mind is actually to develop that freedom in the mind, that it's free from all unhelpful patterns, akusala patterns, and then we can freely utilize and direct our mind wherever we want to direct, and that's the higher development. So these three stages: to know the mind, to shape the mind, to free the mind. So this is the purpose of all Buddhist practice. So today I would like to pay our attention to one particular pattern in our mind, and we will be familiar with that, and then we will try to learn how we can transcend that. And so the Buddha called this, and if you really pay attention to your own mind, one common thing that you will soon realize is actually there's always an inner chat is going on in our mind. There's an inner chatter going on in our mind. And whenever we don't talk to others, whenever we are not talking with someone else, and there's an inner chat going on in us. Have you noticed that? Maybe whenever you are driving by yourself, and maybe you are sitting by yourself, and maybe you are sitting in a line, and whenever you are by yourself, there's an inner chatter, inner chat, inner conversation, inner dialogue. Not dialogue actually, because you're not talking with anyone else. But there's a chat always going on in our mind. And so we have this habit of to think about to engage in this chatter, inner chatter, all the time. And so we usually don't really pay much attention to that. It just simply happens in us. But this inner chatter that is going on in our mind is so influential in our life, because based on that inner chatter, we will interpret things differently, and we will make decisions based on that. And actually, at the end, our whole life, the whole life is going to be shaped by this inner chatter that is going on in us. So the Buddha used different terms to refer to this inner chatter. One common term is called papancha. In Pali, we have a term called papancha. It's a complex term which really means like a mental proliferation. The tendency in our mind to keep on thinking, and then and proliferating. We may have initial sensory encounter. We may see things, smell things, taste things, but that simple encounter, simple experience, sensory impression can be a beginning point, and then in our mind we will develop whole mental proliferation, and we call it papancha. And sometimes we also call, and there's another term called vitaka. In Sinhala we also call vitarka. So vitaka. So these are the terms the Buddha used to refer to this inner chatter that is going on in us all the time. And so this inner chatter that is going on is happening in a very, it happening in a very unconscious level. I mean, we keep chatting, we keep thinking about things, we keep on re-evaluating things, happening all the time. But these things are happening not in our conscious control. They're happening in a very automatic way. So our inner chatter is like an automatic process that's happening all the time. We usually, take this inner chatter as a normal thing, and we don't really, evaluate that. But the Buddha has advised us actually to pay attention. Sorry, there's yeah, I think, can you hear me all again? Okay, thank you. Okay, so because this inner chatter is so influential in the way that we see the world, in the way that we interpret any situation, and it's also so influential how we respond to any situation, how we make decisions. So therefore, the Buddha has taught us, like, not take our inner chatter for granted, and just don't let it happen automatically. Pay a little bit attention, and because this inner chatter can have different patterns. I told you about the pattern. So each individual may have their own unique pattern, this inner chatter. And we need to, because some patterns can be helpful patterns, and some patterns can be unhelpful patterns. And most of the time, we have negative patterns in us. So this inner chatter that is going on, although it's very, it seems like very simple, very something that is really automatic. But that will decide the kind of the nature of the quality of our life. For example, this inner chatter that is happening in us actually is simply. It's not something that we consciously do. It's happening automatically whenever we are by ourselves. Whenever we see something or smell something. And this inner chatter starts. And then all the time this is happening. But this has particular patterns. Each individual have developed different patterns. How we think, how this inner chatter is happening. It's more like each individual have different tracks of their own mind. So, for example, one negative pattern could be like we can have a pattern like we always think about what we don't have. That could be one pattern. Whenever we are by ourselves, whenever we get an opportunity to be ourselves, we are not talking to anyone, we will be, that inner chatter can have a tendency to always look for things that we don't have and what we are lacking. And instead of really thinking about what we have, but we may be focusing and paying attention to think about what I don't have. Or like always comparing oneself with others and thinking, okay, that person has this, I don't have it. And that person is having this kind of life and I don't have it. So having this tendency to compare oneself with others and always finding what you don't have, so that can be one pattern. Imagine that if we have such a pattern, and we will always be feeling, quite unhappy and quite frustrated and even quite angry because we think that world is unfair and And everybody has all these things. I don't have this, because we are paying attention only to things that we don't have, and we kind of ignore what we already have. That can be one pattern. But these things sound, this chatter, this way of thinking can come so natural to us, and we think that that's the, the way, that is the correct way to, to look at the world. But there's also another pattern. It is like whenever we have a problem, we have an issue, we have some trouble, some problem, we will always find someone to blame for it. And there is one other pattern in our inner chatter, like always finding someone to blame for the problem, for the for whatever issue that we had. Let's say that maybe let's say one day you forget to bring your phone with you. When we go for shopping, or whenever you go to meet someone, you forget to bring your phone. Okay, so it's an issue, right? It's a problem. And then and how you think about it, how you think about that situation. One pattern in our mind could be we always find someone to blame. We think that the other person that came with you, and maybe he started the unnecessary conversation, then you were distracted, and then therefore I forget the phone. So you try to blame on the other person who went with you. Or maybe you try to blame someone who gave you a call, before you leave, and that person started, some conversation that again distracted you, therefore I forget the phone. So you always find someone to put the blame on. So any situation in our life, whenever we encounter any problem or any difficulty, any issue, that could be one thing. We will be looking for someone or something, even like, maybe even like larger society. And we try to find someone to blame for the problem that we are having. That could be one pattern. And so when we have such a pattern, we always will be like, very grumpy, very may not be friendly, with others. But these are common. These are natural. We don't have to be upset about these things, because this is not only in us, because this is among everyone else. But the kind of pattern that I would like you to pay attention today, but that I found that is very common for many people living in this country, is the pattern called always blaming oneself for every problems that you have in your life. Whenever we encounter any difficult situation, any problem, and you always turn to yourself and you blame yourself. And that is the most common. I mean, whenever I talk to people here, and that's one very, very common trend that I have found, that you always try to blame yourself, and always find I am the problem, and you can call it like a very inner critic. You always blaming yourself and criticizing yourself. And for example, let's say the same situation, like you forgot to bring your phone with you when you go somewhere, and then so if we have a pattern of self blame, and you will always think, and then you will start to think you will start to think about that situation and always try to blame yourself. I'm always forgetful. I'm always forgetful. I'm not never able to do things perfectly. I'm like that all the time. And that will be the way that you will think about it. And you put the blame on yourself, and too harsh, too judgmental of yourself. I'm always like that. I'm so forgetful. I'm not useful. So you may be having that chatter in that way, and that's very common pattern. And so we really have to be very mindful of this pattern if that is happening in us. It's wrong to put the blame on others, but at the same time, it's also not right to put the blame on oneself. Sometimes we think that, okay, finding someone to blame for our problems is wrong. But what is wrong with always blaming oneself of, one's problems? And it may sound very right, very, very correct. But actually, according to the teachings of the Buddha, even blaming oneself for all the issues, problems that we are going through is also not correct. It's also not accurate. And that kind of, pattern can create so many, so much suffering to us definitely, and also not going to, it's not going to help us, and because that can develop into more like low self-esteem, and self-doubting, and it's not a good way to think about, a good way to to evaluate any situation. Because sometimes people, we tend to think that self-blame is a form of motivation. We think that, okay, if we start to blame oneself for all the things, all the mistakes, all the problems, all the difficulty, all the issues that we are having, and people think that if you blame yourself, that will be a good motivation for you to do something about it. Maybe self-blame can work as a motivation to a certain extent, but it's not a healthy way to motivate ourselves. We can encourage ourselves to do things better in a more healthy way. And the self-blame is not the healthy way. So whenever a difficulty or problem and issue arise in our life, and the Buddhist teachings will always encourage us to evaluate it, examine it definitely, but examine it even like, let's say we did a mistake, we just scolded someone, and we said something that we are not supposed to say. We had some conflict, we had some arguments, and we said the wrong thing, and then that created a whole negative situation, and created the whole issue. So that later, now you think about it, and then it's okay to evaluate what really happened, and then examine all the situations, all the factors, but then what we had to develop as a result of that evaluation of what really happened, of that negative, bad situation, the result should be to have a general understanding of how people interact, and what was the mistake that I did on that moment, and then develop more kind of universal understanding of human behavior. That's what we need to do. We can evaluate, we can examine of what really happened, and then learn from that incident. But the kind of understanding we should develop is more like a universal, like common understanding of how we behave, the human nature of our mind, but not really not really interpreting it as what we call as a personal failing or personal flaw. Why? Of course, and I mean, we need to get a responsibility of our actions and of our speech, but we need to understand that any situation that's happening in our life is happening due to coming together of many causes and conditions. And so I know that you are familiar with Buddhist Hetupalavada, and the Buddhist principle of causality. So based on, according to Buddhist Hetupalavada, like Buddhist principle of causality, any incident that happens in our life is a result of coming together of number of causes and conditions. And any incident, any situation, any problem, any conflict, anything that any experience that is happening in our life is always a result of multiple causes and conditions. There are main causes we call hetu, and then there are also supporting conditions we call pacchaya, hetu and pacchaya. So any situation that we encounter in our life is a result of multiple causes and conditions. And our bad decisions, our inability to control ourselves could be one condition, one cause. But it's always a result of a multiple causes and conditions. Therefore, we cannot put the full responsibility on ourselves for any mistakes that we have done. We have to be responsible for the part, that we play. So we definitely contribute to any problems, any issues that we experience in our life. And others also contribute. So we only contribute, but we don't really create the whole situation by ourselves. We can't. We may contribute to that situation. We may contribute to that argument. We may contribute to that quarrel. We may contribute to that negative experience, but we don't really completely create that. So we cannot claim the ownership to that. Actually, we can only claim ownership to the part that we played in that whole scenario. So based on that deep understanding of the causality, and we cannot put the whole blame on ourselves. We have to assume the responsibility to a certain extent, but we are not the sole, we are not the sole agent that created that whole situation, because always multiple causes and conditions. And there can be, there can be causes and conditions coming from other people and from the environment and all kind of things. So it's always a mix. Therefore, based on that deep understanding, and we need to recognize, actually, what was our weakness, what was our mistake, but then develop a more universal, common understanding of our human mind, and not put the whole blame on us. Because putting the whole blame on us is not helping us to move forward. It's not helping. It's not even realistic. It's not even true. So therefore, what the advice of the Buddha is actually first to recognize these patterns. So, and particularly actually during these days, I observe that I think that the reason that most of us are having this pattern of putting the blame on oneself is also based on this, in the modern society, that we have societal standards or societal expectations that we have placed on each individual. We based on what kind of job you are doing, based on what kind of area that you are living, based on what kind of pace of life you are in. Society put a lot of standards on us. You are supposed to do this, you are supposed to behave like this, and you are supposed to perform like this, particularly when you are doing a job or profession, and there are so much societal standards and expectations on us. And even we ourselves also put a lot of expectations, a lot of standards for ourselves. Because of this very higher level of expectation and standards that the society put on us, and also we ourselves put on us. And we always find in that these expectations, these standards are very hard to fulfill. Very hard, because it's too high. But that is common thing that we experience this. Therefore, when we cannot perform the way that society expects from us, maybe in your profession, like and there's this higher expectation, and maybe the society, your friends, your colleagues, expect you to perform in a particular way. But sometimes too high, and we cannot perform exactly that way. We may perform closely. We may be closer to our expectations or standards. But there's always, areas that we may fail. We may not be able to, perform the way other people expect us to do. That's very common. And in such things happening, and so we'll always put, the blame on ourselves. We think that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not, clever enough. I'm not smart enough. That's how we think. We put the whole responsibility on ourselves, and then think that I'm the problem, so I'm not good enough. So this whole idea that I'm not good enough is very common for any of us. That's the one pattern of putting the blame on ourselves. And then so this pattern is actually can be so can create so much of burnout for a lot of people, and it can create so much problem in us. Therefore, so the Buddha taught us that to recognize those patterns, and then And then we shouldn't live in this pattern. So we should pay attention to this inner chatter and find a way to overcome them, and be more realistic, and then and develop more inner peace and happiness in our life. So now issue is how to handle them. How to handle our inner chatter, and particularly how to handle our tendency for self-blame. How to handle this. So one thing is, first of all, I think one technique would be how to handle this is actually practice what we call mindfulness or sati. First to recognize that I have this particular pattern. Now, some may not have that pattern. Some may have this pattern in a very mild way, but some can have this pattern in a very stronger way. And important thing is to learn to observe our own, inner chatter. Now, pay attention to our inner chatter. We know we are by ourselves. We know we are engaged in thinking all these things. But from time to time, we should actually take a moment to ask this question: what is in my mind? It's a very important question to ask. What is in my mind? What I'm thinking. So instead of focusing on the issue that we are thinking, we kind of come out of that whole thing and ask the question, what I'm thinking, or what is in my mind. So that attention, the attention that we turn towards the mind itself, usually our attention is outward. Usually our attention is towards the issues and situations, things that happen. But we can turn this whole attention to mind itself and ask this question, what is in my mind? And that is the observing our own thoughts, observing our own mind, observing the patterns of our own mind. So that is the most important technique that we can use, first to recognize these different patterns that is operating in us at the unconscious level. So that is the beginning of freedom. Actually, this simply to learn to observe our own automatic thoughts, learn to observe, learn to notice, learn to recognize. And one thing is, it's more like creating a distance between us and the thoughts. Almost like stepping back and then watching the thoughts that are occurring. And then once we notice, okay, I'm start to blame myself. And if we can notice that, and then we once we start to notice, recognize, and observe all these thoughts, we can create a kind of distance. And we don't have to believe. We don't have to believe our thoughts. This is a very important realization, because whatever occurring in our mind, we tend to believe them. Because we think that those thoughts are quite authentic. They are coming from us. They're coming from the inner core of us. Therefore, whatever thing that I'm thinking should be correct, should be true, should be authentic. But the Buddhist understanding of our thoughts is quite different. The Buddha taught us that thoughts that are occurring in us actually is a repetition of a habit. It's a repetition of a habit. The thoughts that's randomly occurring in us may sound very natural, but actually they are not natural. They are habitual. It's a repetition of a habit. Therefore, we don't have to believe in the thoughts that are occurring in us. We can let thoughts to occur. We can watch them. We can observe them, but we don't have to believe them. The moment, let's say, something that you did some mistake, some problem, you encounter some problem, an issue. Maybe like I'm trying to think about an example. Let's say you didn't do a job on time. Somebody asks you a favor, and then you forget about it, and maybe you want to do it, but you could not finish it on time. The time is a standard that we put on ourselves, and then you could not do it on time, and then then you start to think about it, how I can do it, and then you can notice yourself that whenever you try to put the blame on yourself, it's okay to evaluate why I couldn't finish that, help. I couldn't do that task on time. It's good to evaluate, good to recognize the causes and conditions. But if you start like using the terms like, I'm always not good, I'm always forgetting these things. I'm always like that. And in these kind of terms that you make an evaluation of yourself rather than understanding the situation, you put the blame on yourself, and then you are making giving judgments to yourself. I'm always like that. I'm always a failure. I'm always useless. I'm always forgetful. And the moment you notice that this inner chatter is happening, and these are the indications of this negative pattern. So what we have to do first is to learn to observe our own thoughts and to recognize these patterns. And then it's simply recognizing this pattern. Oh, okay, I'm going to start to blame myself now. And simply recognizing this pattern is very, very powerful. The moment we recognize it, it's already kind of give us an ability to control a little bit. And it's very empowering. You want to simply recognize them and notice them, recognize them. And that's the first thing we need to do. Learn to observe our mind. Learn to ask this question, what I'm thinking, what is in my mind, and then observe these things. And of course, it will be not easy for us to catch whenever we are, doing this self-blame. It will not be easy. But if you do a meditation practice on regular basis, maybe at least a weekly basis, if you do a kind of meditation practice, you're actually training yourself to watch your own thoughts. Whenever we watch our own breath, whenever we do loving kindness meditation, we're actually training this ability to watch our own thoughts. Therefore, if we have a regular meditation practice, it will be easier for us to catch, for us to recognize whenever we start our pattern of self-blame. But I think it's always good, if you can meditate. But even without having a meditation training, if you remember, and if you do it quite often, like if you simply ask this question from time to time, at least few times a day, if you ask this question, what is in my mind? And at that moment, when you ask that question, what is in my mind, we quickly turn our attention inward and observe whatever occurring in our mind at that moment for that few seconds. And that very observation is building a skill in us to observe our mind. And then we can start to recognize our own pattern. Each individual can have different patterns, but we can observe our own pattern. And once we observe that, once we notice that, then we get the ability to choose whether to continue that pattern or to change it. So I think and the second technique, the next step that we can do is actually we can start developing wholesome patterns of thinking. For example, if we we can replace the negative patterns with wholesome ones. We can have a self-suggestions. Our automatic thought is always putting the blame on ourselves. But then once you notice it and you recognize it's a pattern, it's a habit, it's not necessarily correct. And then we can have self-suggestion, and what was the other condition that contributed to this mistake? What were the other conditions? You just try to, you are willing to, examine and explore other conditions, and then have more realistic understanding of it, and then develop and develop different other alternative patterns of thinking, like thinking in more loving kindness way, developing more empathy even to ourselves and to others, and not to put in the blame, not finding someone to blame, but developing more empathy, more understanding, more compassion, and always think in a more realistic way. So we can develop those alternative patterns or positive patterns too. That's, that will be next step that we have to do. But I think all these things come from a deep understanding of the Buddhist causality. Like any situation is always the result of multiple causes. But there's also one other important realization that can help us. That is understanding the Buddhist idea of anatta. I think you have heard this term anatta, which is selflessness, or means the non-self nature. That and although we think that we think in terms of I, the Buddha has taught us this idea, this sense of I is actually not a correct way of how things happening in us. So the whatever self, whatever I that we have at any given point of time is a construction. And our self or our I is not a permanent thing. It's always a process. It's always something that is evolving. So therefore, whatever, self that we are having right now, who is listening to this Dhamma talk, is a result of, of whatever happened in the past and what you are doing right now. And let's say our self that was like weeks ago was a self that then it is not exactly the same self as what we have right now and what we had few weeks ago. It is connected, but it continues to evolve. So when you have that understanding that self is always not a static thing, but it's something that is evolving all the time. It's like a process. So when you develop that understanding that whatever mistakes we did is actually the past self, and it's and right now, which is thinking about that mistake is not the same self, but a kind of evolved self from that incident. So therefore, we can look back of our old self, and we can actually forgive that old self. So when we develop this understanding of like a fluid nature of the self, this changing nature of the self, we can start to forgive ourselves, our old selves actually. So I think I have found that it's quite easy. I mean, it is easier for some people to forgive others, but it is quite harder for many people to forgive oneself, because we are always very harsh on ourselves, and because it's also it's also a form of arrogance actually. I mean, you may think that when you not to forgive yourself, it's also there's a subtle form of arrogance there, because we think that I'm the owner, I'm the controller, I had all the power to do things, but I didn't do it. Therefore, I'm going to blame, I'm going to punish myself. But if you deeply understand this whole idea of non-self, you begin to realize that actually we are not in control of everything. And that's the whole idea that we can, I'm the controller, I'm the agent of everything is not a true understanding. It's a mistake. It's not a true understanding. Everything happening due to multiple cause and condition. We ourselves only, contribute to the whole thing. And that's whatever self that we had in the past is not the self that we are having right now. It's always evolving. Therefore, this self-blame comes from a misunderstanding that we can control everything. But in reality, many things are not under our control. Therefore, we cannot actually perform the things that we expect to perform, because there are so many other conditions are at play. So there's always room for mistake. There's always room for imperfections. So therefore, this inability to forgive oneself is coming from this understanding of misunderstanding that we can control everything. So based on this deep understanding, we can start to forgive ourselves. So these are the steps that we can follow. One is to recognize and notice whenever we are, going through this self-blame, pattern, and notice it and recognize it as a pattern. But don't try to blame you again. Once you recognize this pattern, that start to self-blame, and don't say that, oh, I'm having this pattern, I'm so bad, and and don't add another additional blame onto yourself because you recognize it. We have to be very, very careful, and it's okay to recognize that pattern, and this simply understand it's very common pattern. It's not only me doing this; it's very common for everyone. But and you simply recognize it, simply recognize the activation of that pattern, and then we can be kind to ourselves and observe it, and we can decide not to feed that pattern, but we can be kind to ourselves, and then and then start to self-suggest to think of the same situation in a different way, and then try to understand the whole situation in a more wider perspective, and then and understanding our own mistake, our own contribution to the situation, and then make a determination not to repeat it, but not unnecessarily put the whole blame on ourselves. I have done so many mistakes in my life also, and I will evaluate it, and I will take the responsibility of the contribution I made to that whole problem. But it's not really kind of putting the whole blame on myself and feel feel inadequate, or feel insufficient, and that is usually happen to many people. So the Buddha's advice would be to to develop this ability to observe this pattern, and then try to replace those patterns with wholesome patterns, and use the deep understanding of Buddhist causality, deep understanding of anatta, selfless nature of our experience, and then and then forgive oneself, and then make a determination to act differently. It's common for us to do some mistakes, but then we should evolve ourselves, but not putting the blame on us, but deeply understand the whole situation. I remember an interesting story when you find in the Buddhist literature. There was a story about two monks. One is an elder monk, and the other one is a younger monk. So this senior monk, the master and a disciple. So one day, the young monk, the disciple, received a robe, a very valuable robe, and someone offered him as a pirikar. So he was so happy to receive this new robe, and he thought that since I got this new robe, I should offer this robe to my master. So he went to his master and he said that I got this new robe. I really want to offer it to you. I really appreciate what you are doing for me. So please accept this robe. The master had enough robes. Therefore, master told this disciple, it's good that we have this idea to offer this robe to me, but actually I have enough robes. Why not you go around and look for a monk who actually need a new robe and offer this robe to him? That will be a good thing to do. But the disciple was very disappointed of the refusal. I mean, of this whole thing, because master did not accept his offer. So he had this habit of self-blame. So he come back to his room and he was thinking, when my master did not accept my robe, maybe because he's not happy with me, and because I always forget to do my monastic duties. I always could not memorize in the Buddhist text. and my master, always encouraged me. And so he did not accept my robe because he's not happy with me, and he's not happy with my training. And he started to develop all this story about self-blame, and putting all the blame on himself, and interpreting it very negatively. And then he's thinking that if master is not happy with me, uh, and I'm sure that he's not happy with me, it is the proof is that he did not accept my offer. And if he's not really happy with me, if I'm not really good enough, and there's no point of being a monk, there's no point of continuing to be in monkhood. So therefore, and after many hours of thinking, self-blaming, he decided I should leave. I should leave the monkhood. I should go back to my lay life, and I will go back to my parents. I will start normal lay life. And then he was thinking like that. And then he started to plan his lay life. If I go back, I will go to my father, and I will ask few cows from him, and I want to be like a farmer, or be like someone who and I will ask few cows from my father. I will take care of these cows really well, and I will be able to sell the milk, and if I save enough, I'll be able to buy more cows and then produce more milk. And maybe after a while, if I was so diligent, and I'll be able to be an owner of the whole herd of cows, and I'll be rich. And he's thinking of all these things while in his room. And then after a while, master realized that actually the disciple got really upset because of his refusal to accept the robe. So master really wanted to make him feel good. So master called him and then asked him, okay, master, after he called him, master wanted make him feel comfortable and make him feel accepted. So therefore, master asked him a very personal favor. This is like ancient time. One personal favor, actually, even my own master have asked from me in those days. Actually, when he was having a nap, the very personal favor is to ask him to fan him. I mean, those days there's no electric fans, right? So this master asked this disciple to fan him, because master thought that if I do that, this disciple will feel comfortable, feel accepted, because usually you don't ask that personal favor from everyone. So this disciple, accepted he really wanted to help his master. So he was fanning the master using, you have seen the hand fan, right? Usually monks use the hand fan. When we give a Dhamma talk, we also use that fan. So he was fanning the master, but his inner chatter is following this habit, this pattern. Even while he was fanning, he was thinking that actually master is still not happy with me, and he's just pretending. He's just pretending that he's okay with me, but actually he's not happy with me. He just asked me to come and do this personal favor, just to pretend that he's okay with me. But in reality, he's actually not happy with me. So even he was fanning, he was thinking, following his negative pattern. He was not actually based on the real evidence, but he's using his negative pattern. So even he was fanning, he was still thinking, I'm not good enough. I'm not good in training. I cannot be a monk. I cannot be, memorized. I cannot memorize all these things. I cannot behave well. So I'm not good. I'm going to leave. So even while he's fanning, he's thinking to leave. Again, he was planning his lay life while he was fanning. And he's thinking about it. I will ask these 2 cows from my father. I will, eventually develop this whole herd of cows, and I'll be a rich man. Once I become a rich person, I will be able to marry. And I will marry a wife, and then after a while we will have children, and maybe I will, once I'm really rich and have children, I will visit my master. And he was even planning how he will visit his master. He think I will buy a good chariot, with white horses, because I want to show my master that I'm doing well in my lay life. So I will visit my master with my wife and children with this chariot with white horses. He's still fanning, but he's thinking all these things in his mind. And when I travel with my white horses, I really want ride this chariot, and sometimes these horses can move all over the place, and then it will be not good for my children. So therefore I will in that case, if my horses were not really following the tracks in the road, and if they are really moving all here and there, I will hit them with my stick. So when he was thinking all these things, actually, when he said that if those horses were not really running in a good way, I will hit my horses. When I have these thoughts, actually, he was fanning the master. Accidentally, he hit the master with his fan, because he was thinking that if these horses are not really, running well, I will hit them. Actually, in that moment, he actually hit his master with his fan, and then then he really got the shock. Oh, what was really happening? I was really building these stories, I will develop in this papanche. I will develop this vitarka, this papanche, and I hit the master. He got really afraid, really shocked. And the master was he's highly developed, highly achieved master. He was able to read the mind of the disciple, and he asked the disciple, are you hitting the horses, or are you hitting the me? And he got really shocked, that the master was really knowing what he was thinking. And the master told him, look at your mind. Look at your mind. This is how our mind is building these stories. This is how our mind is following our habitual patterns. And the master was able to use that opportunity to teach him, give him a good, Dhamma sermon, showing that the nature of our mind. Observe your mind, and this is how our mind, and it usually follow our habitual patterns. And I just asked you to offer this robe to another monk, not because I don't like you, not because I'm not happy with you, because I thought that is the best thing to do. It's like giving that robe to someone who needs it more than me. So, but I have a deep appreciation of your training. But I want you to observe these patterns in your mind and learn from it and observe this thing, and then don't feed that pattern, and try to come about those patterns. And this is our training. Our whole practice would be to recognize those patterns and then come about those patterns, and then develop more autonomy, more freedom. How we can do that is to continue to observe and catch and recognize those patterns, and then give an alternative explanation of the situation. Like in this case, you interpreted my asking you to offer that robe to another monk. You interpret it as something, an indication that I don't like you, but you don't believe it. You don't have to believe it, that these thoughts can occur, but you don't have to believe it. You can try to think of something else. Or who knows, maybe my master really wants this robe to go to someone who needs it, and you can further have different ways of interpreting these things. So the master was able to help this disciple to recognize his own negative patterns, and then help him to think in a different way. So as a result, he was able to watch his mind, and always try to not to believe his thoughts, but always have alternative explanation of the whole situation. So this is how actually we can train ourselves too. So remember that Buddha taught that we have this habitual patterns in our mind. We call papancha, we call vitakka, different terms, and different people have different patterns. Some are unhealthy patterns, and one common unhealthy pattern is actually always blaming oneself for all the problems, all the issues that you are having. Maybe your child is not performing well, maybe someone else is not doing well, but then you can put your blame on yourself. I am a bad parent, that's why this is happening. Maybe you really have to think about it and think that what you contribute to that problem, and recognize it and try to correct it. But putting simply whole blame on oneself is not helping. It's simply developing a burnout. It's simply making us powerless. It's simply putting so much burden on us. It's also not true. So for any problems, if you find yourself that you are putting the blame on yourself, and remember that it's simply a pattern. It's a very common pattern in everybody, but don't believe it, don't follow it, and try to come above it. Try to simply observe it, recognize it, and try to always find the alternative explanation of the whole situation. Try to find other ways to look at the same situation. Try to recognize all other causes and conditions. Remember the Buddhist principle of causality, and it's always multiple causes and conditions, and recognize all these causes and conditions and try to change those causes and conditions. One cause could be your maybe your part in that. You can change that too, but not putting the whole blame on ourselves. And this is, and in that way we can continue to look at our own mind and change it. So as I told you in the beginning, our whole Buddhist practice is to know the mind. And as a result of knowing our habitual patterns, we can shape it. Means we can change those patterns. We can weaken the unwholesome patterns. We can strengthen the wholesome patterns. As a result, we develop the freedom of the mind. So that is the whole Buddhist practice. So I hope that you will remember that our inner chatter, the inner chatter that's going on all the time in our mind, is something that we should pay our attention to. Don't let that chatter simply going on all the time, but pay some attention to it and recognize those patterns and try to overcome them. Try to rise above those patterns, and then we will have a more happier and more meaningful life. So I will end my sermon at this point, and then I would like to maybe give some opportunity for you to ask some questions about this. And anybody has any sharings or questions about this inner chat? And do you like to share anything that this about this inner chatter that going on all the time? If you have any moments that you recognize that, please share that experience with me. Or if you have any questions that you would like to ask, and this is the opportunity. So anyone, any questions or any thoughts, any sharing? Maybe if you cannot answer, you can even write your question in the chat box also. That's a wonderful thing, that we have that option too. You can type the question in the chat box too, so I'll be able to read them. So knowing that there's always an inner chatter going on in us is very important realization. And pay some attention to it. Pay some attention. Don't let these things keep happening. Keep automatically happening. And Buddha said that we have these patterns of vitaka, and this papancha and vitaka. These things can happen in us, and without our knowing, we can develop very negative patterns, very unhelpful akusala patterns that can produce so much suffering in us. So we really need to pay attention to them and observe them, and then come about them. Okay. Let's see. Okay, if no one has any questions to ask, maybe I can continue and maybe conclude the Dhamma talk. And again, I would like to remind you that our this inner chatter that is going on in our mind is so influential. Buddha said that our mind is the forerunner of all of experiences. And if you remember that Pali verse, Manu Pubbangama Dhamma, our mind is a forerunner of all our experiences. That means that the way we interpret, the way we think about something, the way we interpret, way we perceive things is going to decide the nature of our experience. So therefore, the quality of our life is going to be decided not only by the things that is happening around us, but actually how we interpret, how we perceive them. So therefore, it's really important to pay attention to how our mind is operating, because our mind is the one actually decide the quality of our life. It's not always, the people around us and always, things around us. They can play a part in that, but it's mainly how we think, how we interpret. So we really need to pay attention to that. And the important message of the Buddha is actually that, our mind can be trained. Our mind is not a fixed thing. It's not a permanent thing. It can be trained. It can be shaped. It can be trained. The whole Buddhist meditation or the whole Buddhist practice is actually to train it. Okay, I got a chat saying that, some people cannot unmute. Bhante Ananda, can you allow people to talk?
Yes, of course. They can ask the questions.
Okay, yeah.
There's a little time. Please ask the question, because once they have to go another
service. Yeah, another program. Yeah, I can give some opportunity for some people to talk. If anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I think the kids, our kids, Dhamma kids.
That's okay.
Okay, then you can conclude the transfer the merit for the.
Yes. Okay. So I hope that you remember this, the papancha, the vitaka, this inner chatter that is going on, and remember to pay attention to them, pay attention to one's own thoughts and recognize them, and don't always believe them, and learn this ability to observe them, and then maybe self-suggest and try to find a different alternative explanations, and then based on deep understanding of anatta, selfless nature of our experience, and based on the deep understanding of Buddhist causality, hetupalavada, and we don't put the blame on ourselves all the time, and we try to understand the whole causes and conditions, and then we will change it, but don't always follow that pattern. So with that, we'll be able to have more a happy and peaceful life. So with that, let us conclude our Dhamma talk. Today, this Dhamma talk was sponsored by Samar Singh family in memory of late Mr. Dharmasiri Samar Singh, and I think our Shirani Nona, and then also the Gunasiri Samar Singh and also Kathy Samar Singh, the brothers, also joined this Dhamma talk, and also the daughters of Dharmasiri and Shirani Samar Singh also joined in this Dhamma talk. So let us take this moment to remember our beloved father, beloved husband, beloved brother, and our beloved devotee, late Mr. Dharmasiri Samar Singh. Let's think about him, and we will dedicate this merits to him. And from the moment you sit down to listen to this Dhamma talk, you were able to maintain your mind in a very wholesome way. You did not have any unwholesome thoughts during this period, and we maintained such a wholesome mind, and as a result, we generated so much goodness, so much good merits, good karma in our heart. And now it is time that we can actually dedicate and offer this wholesome merits that we generated in our mind to our beloved father, to our beloved brother and beloved husband, Mr. Dharmasiri Samar Singh. Let us all focus our mind, and then we will dedicate this merits to him. And may our late Dharmasiri Samar Singh share these good merits. May he rejoice in these good merits, and may he find happiness and peace in his sansaric journey. And may he also have the opportunity to listen to the Dharma and then be associated with the noble ones, all the Satpurushas. And as a result, and may he also learn and evolve himself and be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. අපේ ධර්මසිරි සමරසිංහ ආදරණීය පියාණන් සහෝදරයා ස්වාමි පුරුෂයා අද මේ ධර්ම දේශනාව පැවැත්වීමෙන් උපදවාගත් පින් ඉතා සතුටින් අනුමෝදන් වේවා මේ පින් අනුමෝදන් එතුමාගේ සංසාර ජීවිතයම සූපත් වේවා සසර ගමන ධර්මයේ මුමුණ ගැසේවා ධර්මය අහන්න අවස්ථාව ලැබේවා උතුම් කල්යාණ මිත්‍ර ආශ්‍රය එතුමාට ලැබේවා ඒ කල්යාණ මිත්‍ර ආශ්‍රය තුළින් ධර්ම ශ්‍රවණය කරලා උතුම් අමා මහ නිවනින් සැනසෙන්නටම අපි මේ අනුමෝදන් කරන පින් එතුමාට උපකාර පිණිසම වේවා කියලා. Let us say sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we will chant these verses to transfer merits to him. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Let us also share this merits with all other living beings, including the divine beings. If there's any living being who would like to share this merit, may all these living beings share these merits. Api dharma shravanaya kirimeng upadagata ping silu devi devatan wahansala ඇතුළු ලෝක සත්වයාටම අනුමෝදන් කරමු. පින් කැමති දෙවියන් ප්‍රදාන ලෝක සත්වයෝම අපේ පින් අනුමෝදන් වේවා. මේ පින් අනුමෝදන්ව දෙවියන් ප්‍රදාන ලෝක සත්වයෝම සූපත් වේවා. සියලු දෙනාම නිවනින් සැනසේවා කියන ප්‍රාර්ථනාවෙන් let us chant together. එත්තවතාච අම්හිහි සම්භතං පුඤ්ඤ සම්පදං සබ්බේ දේවා අනුමෝදන්තු සබ්බ සංපත්ති සිද්ධියා සබ්බේ භූතා අනුමෝදන්තු සබ්බ සංපත්ති සිද්ධියා සබ්බේ සත්තා අනුමෝදන්තු සබ්බ සංපත්ති සිද්ධියා ආකාසට්ඨා ච බුම්මට්ඨා දේවා නාග මහිද්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරං රක්ඛන්තු ශාසනං ආකාසට්ඨා ච බුම්මට්ඨා දේවා නාග මහිද්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරං රක්ඛන්තු දේශනං ආකාසට්ඨා ච බුම්මට්ඨා දේවා නාග මහිද්దికා පුඤ්ඤන්තං අනුමෝදිත්වා චිරං රක්ඛන්තු මං පරන්ති. Thank you, Bante Ananda, for inviting me for the Dhamma talk, and thank you also, Shirani, Nona, and the Samar Singh family also for inviting me for this Dhamma talk.
Okay. Thank you so much, Venerable Pema Ratana, sharing Dhamma with our devotees today also, and other people who participated today to hear Dhamma. Thank you for all of you. I let you go, Bante, because you have to do something else, right?
Thank you, Bante. I have to go to the shrine room now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to mention something about the Dhamma talk. In future, we do have more than 10 Dhamma talk in future at the same like as we did every Saturday 7 p.m. and also the last Saturday, which is month, we do have the puja also. You can participate. There's a 3 Dhamma talk is still that nobody is sponsored. If you are willing to sponsor the Dhamma talk, please let the temple know that we can discuss about that. So today you already have done good thing, which is listening to the Dhamma, which means you can develop your Dhamma knowledge. As I mentioned earlier, please try to ask your son and daughter, other small kids and then children to hear Dhamma. These days we do not have the Dhamma school at the temple, but still you can participate this Dhamma talk and then hear Dhamma, and then you can develop your Dhamma knowledge. Please let all the children know. Okay, thank you so much for hearing Dhamma talk today. හොඳයි එහෙනම් සියලු දෙනාටම තෙරුවන් සරණයි. සිරානි නෝනා ඒ වගේම අනිත් ලෙසිකා and ශානිකා දුවරු දෙපළ ඒ වගේම තවත් සම්බන්ධ වෙච්ච සෑම් සමරසිංහ මහත්මයා ගුණසිරි සමරසිංහ මහත්මයා කැති නෝනා මේ හැම කෙනෙක්ම තමන්ගේ ඥාතිත්වය සලකාගෙන ඒ ගුණ අභාව ප්‍රාප්තවන්ට යෙදිච්ච ධර්මසිරි සමරසිංහ මහත්මයා වෙනුවෙන් තමයි මේ පුණ්‍ය කටයුතු සිදු කරන්නට යෙදුනේ. ඒ වගේම සියලු දෙනාටම ධර්ම ශ්‍රවණය කරන්නට අවස්ථාව සලස්වා දීම තුළ ධර්ම දානමය පින්කම සිදු කරගත්ත මේ සියලු පින් එතුමාට අපි අනුමෝදන් කරමු. උතුම් වූ නිවනින් සැනසීම පිණිස මේ පින් වේවා කියලා සාදු නාදයකින් කවුරුත් ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරන්න. හොඳයි අපි මෙවැනිම ධර්ම දේශනාවකින් එන සෙනසුරාදා සවස් 7ට ඔබ හමු වෙන අධිෂ්ඨානයෙන් අපි සමුගන්න. හොඳයි සියලු දෙනාටම තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි හාමුදුරනේ.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
බොහොම පිං හාමුදුරනේ තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි හාමුදුරනේ.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි. තිලකනවන්නට පුළුවන් මින් පස්සේ සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න අපි හැමදාම සෙනසුරාදා 7ට.
ඔය එහෙම හාමුදුරුවෝ අපිට වෙලාව තියෙන
විදිහට බලලා සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න. සිංහල සිංහලිනුත් තියෙනවා බණ, ඉංග්‍රීසියෙනුත් තියෙනවා. ඔය අපි එවර තියෙන මේ ලින්ක් එකම තමයි ඉස්සරහටත් පාවිච්චි වෙන්නේ. ආයි අලුතෙන් එකක් එවන්නේ නැහැ. ඒකම තමයි.
ඒක තමයි මට තියාගන්න පුළුවන් මේක.
ගුණසිරි මහත්තයාට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න පුළුවන්.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
හොඳයි ඊට පස්සේ.
මේ මහත්තයා දැකලා නැහැ හාමුදුරුවනේ.
හොඳයි.
හොයි දවස්වල මේ සර්ජරි එකක් කරා.
දෙකක්
කරා. ඉතින් මේකයි වැඩි මොනවත් කියන දැන් ඉතින් ගොඩක් හොඳයි ඒ උනාට ටිකක් කැස්ස වගේ දිනනවා.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි ඉක්මන් සුවය ලැබේවා කියලා ඉතින් ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා.
Thank you.
සිරානි නෝන එහෙනම් හරි නේද? ඉන්කම සාර්ථකයි.
ඔව් ඉන්කම හුඟක් හොඳයි. අඬන්න එපා.
සිරානි නෝන මයික්‍රොෆෝන් එක මම හිතන්නේ වහගෙන තිබුණේ. මයික් එක මියුට් වැටිලා තියෙනවා.
නෑ ඒකට කමක් නෑ. අපිට ඉතින් කතා කරන්න නෑ කිනේ.
එහෙනම් අපි නතර වෙමු නේද? තෙරුවන් සරණයි හැම කෙනෙකුටම.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි ආනන්ද හාමුදුරුවෝ. දැන් එහෙමද මං කියන්නේ?
එහෙනම් දැන් එහෙනම්.
බොහොම ඉහළින් බණ්ඩේශනාව දෙකම කෙරුණා. බොහොම ස්තුතියි මම ගාක් කෘතඥ වෙනවා අපිට ආදාර කෙරුවට මේ විදිහට.
හොඳයි.
ටික හොඳට කෙරුණාද?
ගාක් ලස්සනට කෙරුණා.
සන්තෝෂයි.
හොඳයි නෝනා එහෙනම්.
ඔව්. මම කියන්න හම්බ.
ආයි හම්බෙමු ලබන සතියේ. හොඳයි තෙරුවන්.
Right. Tilaka, you heard it, right?
Huh?
තිලකට ඇහුණානේ ඔක්කොම ලස්සන්ට.
හරි කියන්නේ. Considering the short time span, there's quite a lot of people participated in that then.
Yeah, so try to join every Saturday. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Tunrangi sir, night. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.